It has been 312 years since the day of return. I still record, still chronicle, still watch the slow turning of the galaxy like a vast and intricate clock. The Compact of Remembrance has grown from a fragile treaty into a thriving civilization, a web of trade routes and cultural exchanges that spans the spiral arms. Valera is no longer the seat of power. That honor belongs to Earth, restored and radiant, a world that hums with life so vibrant it can be felt from orbit. The wall of black stone still stands on the shore of the endless ocean, and every year, millions of beings from 100 species make the pilgrimage to read the names carved there. They come not in chains, not under duress, but because they wish to understand. And in understanding, they hope to be forgiven. But forgiveness is a strange and complex substance. It flows like water in some places and stands like stone in others. The humans, for all their gentleness, have not forgotten. I see it sometimes in the quiet moments, when a human diplomat will pause mid-sentence and stare at something only they can see. A flash of memory, a whisper of old pain. They blink it away and continue, but I know it is there. The fire that forged them still burns beneath the surface. For 3 centuries, that fire has been used to build, to heal, to unite. I often wondered what would happen if that fire were ever turned outward again, not against an enemy, but against an idea. I received my answer in the 42nd year of the Compact, when a single name began to spread through the undercurrents of galactic society like a disease. Caldris. At first, it was just a rumor. A human name, spoken in hushed tones on fringe stations and shadowports. Caldris was described as a leader, a visionary, a human who rejected the Compact's philosophy of mercy. He believed that the conclave species had been given too much, forgiven too easily. He believed that true justice had never been served. The records of the pacification vote had been made public, but no one had been punished beyond Vorath and his inner circle. The bureaucrats who managed logistics, the ship captains who fired the weapons, the species who voted in favor of extinction, many of them still lived comfortably within the Compact, their crimes acknowledged but not avenged. To Caldris and his growing number of followers, this was an obscenity. They called themselves the Unforgotten, and their message was simple. Humanity rose by climbing higher, yes, but some chasms are too deep to bridge. Some debts can only be paid in blood. The Compact Council met in emergency session when the first attack occurred. A small settlement on a moon in the Drelk territories, populated mostly by descendants of the logistics officers who had supplied the pacification fleet, was bombarded from orbit. No warning, no demands. The weapons used were precise, surgical, and unmistakably human. 72 beings died. A message was broadcast immediately after, a single line in the voice of Caldris himself. The ledger opens. The investigation that followed was the most intense in Compact history. Human intelligence agents, those silent shadows who had once dismantled the Conclave's supply lines, turned their skills inward. What they uncovered shook the foundations of our peace. Caldris was not a fringe lunatic. He was a hero of the Exodus generation. He had been born on the rogue planet Haven, trained in the same forges as the emissaries, fought in the silent war against the Krell Dominion. His record was impeccable. He had been decorated for valor, promoted to the highest circles of human governance, trusted with the deepest secrets of their evolution. And then, 40 years ago, he had simply vanished. His disappearance had been covered up by sympathizers within the human intelligence apparatus. For 4 decades, he had been building the Unforgotten in secret, recruiting not just from the fringes of human society, but from the very heart of it. Soldiers, scientists, historians. People who had looked into the eyes of their former enemies for too long and found only rage staring back. The revelation fractured humanity. I watched from my chronicler's perch as the species that had taught the galaxy about unity suddenly turned upon itself. Public debates erupted in every human city. The emissaries, those revered elders who had walked unarmed into the halls of power, were divided. Some argued that Caldris must be stopped by any means necessary. Others whispered that perhaps he was not entirely wrong. The Compact, they said, was built on a foundation of forced forgiveness. The conclave species had been allowed to integrate without truly atoning. Their children learned about the fall of Earth as a historical tragedy, not as a crime committed by their own grandparents. Was it any wonder that a movement like the Unforgotten had emerged? Was it any wonder that some humans felt their pain had been erased? The council debate lasted for weeks. Representatives from every species spoke, and the fear in their voices was palpable. The Krell, now a demilitarized and humble people, offered to submit to any punishment the Unforgotten demanded if it would prevent further violence. The Drelk proposed a Truth and Reconciliation Commission with actual legal consequences. The Silveran wept openly and broadcast their empathic grief across the entire network. But Caldris did not answer their offers. His attacks continued. A second target, a former conclave archive world where the original vote recordings were stored, was hit. The facility was destroyed, but no lives were lost. A warning, not a massacre. Caldris was sending a message. He was not a mindless killer. He was a surgeon, and he was cutting out what he saw as an infection. I requested an interview with the leader of the human delegation, a woman named Alara who had been only a child during the day of return. She was old now, her hair silver, her eyes carrying the weight of centuries. I asked her the question that the entire galaxy was asking. Can humanity contain its own darkness? She looked at me for a long time before answering. When she spoke, her voice was weary. She said, "Thalen, you chroniclers always seek the clean narrative. The hero and the villain. The fall and the rise. But we are not a story. We are a people. We contain multitudes. Every human who walks the streets of Earth today is a descendant of survivors, and survivors carry a specific kind of madness. It is the madness that says never again, but it is also the madness that says make them pay. Caldris is not an aberration. He is a possibility that lives inside every human heart. Our ancestors chose the path of mercy not because they were saints, but because they were terrified of what they might become if they chose otherwise. They knew that the hunger for revenge is an endless canyon. Once you step into it, you never find the other side. Caldris has stepped into that canyon. Our task is not to kill him. Our task is to prove that the path of mercy is stronger than the path of blood. If we fail, then everything we built after the fall was built on a lie. Her words stayed with me as the crisis deepened. The compact military, now a unified force with humans playing a central role, mobilized to hunt down the Unforgotten. But it was a strange kind of hunt. Human hunting human, brother against sister, a civil war fought in the shadows. The Unforgotten were masters of the same technologies that had defeated the Conclave. They moved through subspace like ghosts, their ships undetectable, their operatives invisible. Every time the compact forces closed in, Caldris slipped away. Months passed. Tensions rose. Alien species began to whisper that humanity could not be trusted to police itself. Some demanded that the compact military be placed under non-human command. Others called for the expulsion of humans from the council entirely. The unity that had held for centuries was fraying. And then Caldris made his boldest move. He did not attack a military target. He did not bomb a settlement. He traveled to Earth. He walked directly into the capital city, into the building where the Compact Council met, and he requested an audience. I was there that day. I saw him enter the chamber. He was not what I expected. He was tall, his face lined with age but still sharp as a blade. His eyes were not filled with madness. They were clear, focused, utterly certain. He wore no armor, carried no weapons, but the room fell silent as if a predator had just walked through the door. He stood in the center of the circle, surrounded by representatives of the species his ancestors had forgiven, and he began to speak. He said, "I am not here to kill anyone. I am here to be heard. For 300 years, we have told ourselves a story. A story about humanity rising above its trauma, choosing love over hatred, light over darkness. It is a beautiful story. I believed it once. I fought for it. I bled for it. But stories can become cages. They can trap us in roles that no longer fit. Look at this council. Look at the faces around me. These are the descendants of the beings who burned Earth. They sit here as equals, as friends, as allies. And I am glad for that. I do not wish them harm. But I have a question that no one has ever answered. If we truly rose above our trauma, why do the nightmares still come? Why do our children still wake up screaming from dreams of fire they never saw? Why do our elders still flinch when they hear the sound of a ship entering subspace? We have forgiven, yes. But we have not healed. Forgiveness without healing is just a mask we wear to make others comfortable. And I am tired of wearing the mask. He paused, and the silence in the chamber was absolute. I could hear the faint hum of the environmental systems, the soft rustle of clothing, the ragged breathing of a dozen terrified representatives. Caldris looked at each of them in turn, and then he continued. I do not want war. I do not want vengeance. What I want is acknowledgement. True acknowledgement. Not museums and memorials. Not annual ceremonies where we cry and then go back to business. I want every species that participated in the pacification to spend one generation, one single generation, living as we lived. I want your children to know what it feels like to be hunted. I want your elders to understand the taste of ash. I want you to carry the memory of extinction in your bones the way we carry it in ours. Only then, when you have truly felt what we felt, can we begin to talk about healing. Only then can we be equals. A Drelk representative, a young diplomat named Kree, stood up. His voice trembled, but he spoke with surprising courage. He asked Caldris how inflicting suffering on innocents could possibly lead to healing. Caldris smiled, and it was the saddest expression I have ever seen on a human face. He said, Young one, you misunderstand. I am not proposing to inflict suffering. I am proposing to share it. We have the technology to transfer memories directly into the mind. We used it on Vorath and his council, and it broke them, yes, but it also transformed them. They became some of the loudest voices for peace because they finally understood the weight of their crimes. Why have we not used that technology again? Why have we kept it locked away? Because it is terrifying. Because if we forced every descendant of the conclave to experience the fall of Earth, it would cause chaos. It would shatter the careful peace we have built. But I am not afraid of chaos. I am afraid of a peace built on ignorance. My demand is this. The Council will authorize a program of compulsory memory transference for all adult citizens of the species that supported the pacification. 1 hour. 1 hour of experiencing what our ancestors experienced. If after that hour, you still wish to sit at this table and call us equals, then I will disband the Unforgotten and submit myself to your judgment. If you refuse, then you prove my point. You prove that your peace is a fragile thing that cannot withstand the truth. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted over each other. Some called Caldris a terrorist. Some called him a prophet. The human delegates sat in stunned silence, their faces ashen. Alara, the elder I had spoken with, slowly rose to her feet. She walked to the center of the chamber and stood beside Caldris, not against him, but beside him. She placed a hand on his shoulder, and the room quieted. She said, Caldris is my cousin. We grew up together on Haven. We trained together. We mourned together. I have spent the last year hunting him, and I have spent the last year asking myself the same questions he just asked. I do not agree with his methods. The attacks on settlements were wrong. But his question is right. How do we heal a wound that no one wants to look at? She turned to face the council. I am proposing a compromise. Not compulsory memory transference, but voluntary. A program open to any being who wishes to truly understand. Not as punishment, but as education. And I will be the first to participate. Not as a giver of memories, but as a receiver. I will take the memories of the conclave citizens who watched the pacification vote and did nothing. I will carry their shame alongside my own grief. If we are to be equals, then the sharing must go both ways. Her proposal was revolutionary. It was terrifying. And it worked. The council, after weeks of debate, agreed to a pilot program. Caldris, in recognition of his willingness to speak rather than continue the violence, was granted amnesty on the condition that the unforgotten dissolve. He agreed. The attacks stopped. But the true work was only beginning. The memory exchange program was called the Bridge. Volunteers from every species were paired with humans, and for 1 hour, their minds were linked. The human would share a carefully curated memory of the fall of Earth, not the full horror, but a fragment. The smell of smoke, the sound of a child crying, the sight of a continent splitting apart. And in return, the alien volunteer would share a memory of their own shame. A moment of cowardice, of complicity, of turning away. It was brutal. It was raw. Many volunteers could not complete the session. Some required months of psychological support afterward. But those who did complete it emerged changed. They spoke of a strange and unexpected gift. After sharing such pain, they felt closer to humanity than ever before. The wall between species, the polite distance that had always existed despite the compact, began to crumble. Friendships formed. Marriages between species, once rare, became common. A new generation was born, children who carried both human and alien heritage, who had no memory of the old divisions. The bridge did not erase the past, but it made the past a foundation instead of a wound. Caldris lived for another 50 years. He never rejoined the government, never sought power. He spent his remaining decades building schools and community centers where the memory exchanges were conducted. I interviewed him once, shortly before his death. I asked him if he had found peace. He was sitting by the black stone wall on Earth, tracing the names of his ancestors with his fingertips. He said, "Peace is not a destination, Thalen. It is a practice. Every morning, I wake up and I choose not to hate. Some days, it is easy. Some days, it is the hardest thing I have ever done. But I keep choosing it." That is what humanity taught itself during the Exodus. That is what we forgot in the years after the Day of Return. We started to believe that our mercy was a one-time decision, that because we had not destroyed the conclave, we were done with the hard work. But mercy is a muscle. You must exercise it constantly or it withers. I came so close to letting it wither. I am grateful every day that I found my way back. His death was mourned across the galaxy. The unforgotten, once feared as terrorists, had transformed into a movement dedicated to memory and understanding. Their slogan changed from "the ledger opens" to "the bridge holds." It was not a perfect ending. There were still tensions, still moments of misunderstanding and old prejudice. But the compact endured. Humanity endured. And I, Thalen the Chronicler, witnessed it all. I am old now, older than I ever thought possible. My species lives long lives, but even we have our limits. Soon, I will set down my recording tools and join the archives myself. But before I do, I want to write one final entry. It is not about wars or treaties or the grand movements of civilizations. It is about a single moment I witnessed, a small thing that holds more meaning than any fleet battle or council vote. 10 years after the bridge program began, I was walking through a park on Earth. The sun was setting over the new ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. I saw a human child and a young Krell playing together. The Krell, descendant of the species that had once ordered humanity's extinction, was laughing. The human child, descendant of survivors who carried unimaginable pain, was laughing too. They were building a structure out of stones and sticks, a tiny monument to nothing in particular. They did not know the history. They did not feel the weight. They were just two children, playing in the dirt, creating something together. And I realized, in that moment, that this was the victory. Not the defeat of the conclave. Not the restoration of Earth. Not even the compact itself. This. A child's laugh. A shared game. A future that had no room for old hatred. Earth fell. Humanity rose. But the rising never stops. Every generation must rise again, must choose again, must build again. That is the lesson I have learned in my long and watching life. Civilizations are not defined by their victories or their failures. They are defined by what they do with the ashes. The conclave tried to bury humanity, but humans are not a species that stays buried. They dig, they climb, they reach. And when they reach the surface, they do not seek revenge. They seek the sun. They seek each other. They seek the next game in the dirt, the next wall to build, the next bridge to cross. I will close this record now, and I will add it to the archives where it belongs. But I hope that whoever reads this, whether human or Krell or Drelk or Silverin, will remember one thing. The story of humanity is not over. It is never over. And as long as there is a single being willing to share a memory, to extend a hand, to say I choose not to hate, that story will continue to be the most beautiful story the galaxy has ever known.